Hey everyone. Today I want to talk about something that's, kind of something I've wanted to talk about for a while on this channel. As you can see by the title of the video, I put the title as my favorite Linux distribution. Now, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, right? People can have different things that are favorites to them, right? What I'm gonna say in this video isn't meant to be, oh, you have to use this distro, stuff like that. Basically, it's gonna be me talking about, my favorite Linux distribution and why it's my favorite from experience. But you know, anyways, this isn't meant to be a type of video where I'm saying you have to use this Linux distribution, right? It's just meant to be like, hey, this is my favorite and why, and if you want to check it out, go right ahead. But basically, as you can see on the screen here, I have a chart that I brought up. I know, actually, I thought this went to be newer, but maybe I have an old bookmark or something. But I know it only shows 2016, so we're missing about 9 years, maybe almost 10 now, which is crazy. But essentially, this kind of shows, like, this chart's kind of cool. It shows basically Linux distributions, like for example, here's like Slackware, and it shows all the derivatives essentially, right? So it kind of gives you like a visual picture. Like here's Fedora, and you can see there's gonna be Red Hat, and then there's a bunch of smaller ones, right? More smaller things. And then you get like the big ones here. There's Ubuntu, there's Debian, there's Knoppix, stuff like that. Big branches here because like Debian, right? So it's kind of wanted to start out with this video. In this video, showing this chart, just kind of having a visual, right? There's a lot of very different, Linux distributions. There's so many of them. I've used quite a good amount, but there's some, that I don't know until I use. Like there's some on here that I'm seeing that I've never seen before. Like I've used Alpine. I've used, I think, Puppy in like a VM, but basically, from my experience, right, I'm just gonna say this flat out. My favorite Linux distribution to use, and the one that I kind of, from all my experience, keep going back to is, one that probably doesn't shock anyone by surprise. It's very good. It's very stable, well-rounded. It is not Ubuntu. I know I probably got some people there, but my favorite Linux distribution of all time, and it's my favorite that's near and dear to my heart. Excuse me, is Debian. Now you may ask why? Why is Debian your favorite? Well, there's a couple reasons why. Even it says it on their website. Reasons to use Debian, right? I'm not just gonna say read the screen and figure it out yourself, but for me, Debian, coming from like basically, used to be like a Windows user, right? I used Windows, everything. I think starting with 98 all the way up to basically 10. Yeah, I used that's what I had, like, because that's just all there was. I didn't think of using Linux back then because I was younger, right? I was just a kid going in high school. I wasn't fully into like Linux and all that quite yet. That was more when I started college. But anyways, some of my reasons why Debian is my favorite is it just kind of felt like an overall good, stable operating system. It just felt like a product that did, or not a product. It felt like an operating system that did what it needed to do, and that was that. And there was no extra fluff, no extra add-ons, no extra BS, unless you said you wanted it when doing the install or whatnot, right? So that was a big thing for me, because I'm sure you guys are all sick of this as well, but I got so sick of installing like Windows 10, and you gotta like debloat it, remove all the crap, blah 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 blah. And I just want something out of the box that did that, and Debian does. You can just install it the way you want. You can do, I think you can just select. I think it's just standard system utilities, and you're pretty much good to go. It comes up just in a terminal, and you got to install the desktop environment yourself. You can add all your custom packages and file encodings, all those things. So that was probably one of the biggest things for me. I just wanted something that you can install it. There's no crap, whatever. But I know every Linux distribution you can do that. But Debian was one of the first ones that did it successfully, and it just kind of resonated with me, right? The second reason, and I think it probably, yeah, it says it on here. Debian is stable. I know like there's a lot of like stable distributions, right? But Debian for me is but extremely stable. I don't think I've had an instance yet where I've had any sort of like crashes or anything where I've really gotten burned per se. I mean, I know on Windows, like I had a couple of issues every now and then. It was just mainly like blue screening or things would kind of seize up like during a Windows update and whatnot. But I've never had any like really bad like freezes or incidents where I've lost data while on Debian. It's been really stable, and I have some servers that run Debian here in my home lab, and I turn them on. I let them run. There's no issues. I mean, I try to reboot once in a while just because it's good practice, but overall I've had really, it's just stable, and you power on and it works, and there's no like update prompting, and you can just leave it on. You don't have to update it. There's not like a little Windows like automatic restart that pops up that annoys the crap out of everybody, right? So you can just leave it and it's stable, right? I have a older server, not an older server, but one of my servers that I first set up for my home lab. I think I'm running Debian 11 on that one. And I know now there's Debian 13, so I'm like 2 generations behind, right? It would kind of be the equivalent if someone is still using Windows 8, I guess, if you want to think about it like that. But it's running Debian 11. It still gets updates because they have the 5-year long-term support agreement, and there's no money involved with it, and there's no you don't have to sign up with an email and all that kind of stuff because it's Linux. But essentially, it's just really stable and it's solid, right? It feels good when I use it. I know it's probably hard for some people to understand, but you just there's a feeling you get when something just feels like a solid product, and that'll never go away from me. And I guess another thing for me is it's very, you can install it via like the CLI, you can do it via the GUI. I mean, I know a lot of distros can do that, but Debian makes it pretty simple, right? Kind of goes through the steps and all those kind of things, right? And another key component for me is we kind of go back to this chart here. If it loads, yeah, here we go. Another key thing for me is like if you use like one of these distros that branch off like this Debian chart, odds are, it's gonna feel pretty much the same, kind of, it within the gist of things. Like for example, like at some point, you guys have probably used Kali. Like I used it, in college and my like pen testing classes. I use it at home. I do Hack the Box, right? I just use it because it's something I'm familiar with, and it's Debian. So if there's a problem with the OS under the hood, I can just use my like basic, my knowledge from Debian to kind of help me troubleshoot. If maybe hey, there's maybe something screwed up with like the apt, the default package manager, something like that. So it just kind of helps you like lay down the foundation, and then you're like you have a solid understanding, right? And same with like Ubuntu and stuff. For my job, I use like we have an Ubuntu. I have an Ubuntu kind of automation thing that I have for work because we have to use Ubuntu. It's a long story, but even using Ubuntu, it's just like okay, unless like you really get deep into it, it really feels like Debian to me. I mean, unless I do a neo fetch or fast fetch and look at the logo it shows, it really feels the same. I mean, yeah, there's some differences like within the file structure, all that kind of thing, but when it comes down to it, it really like stems from Debian. And same with like Linux Mint and Linux Mint Debian Edition. Linux Mint came from Ubuntu, which came from Debian, and then Linux Mint Debian Edition came from Debian. So you can kind of put two and two together. And there's a lot of distros that came from Debian. There's some interesting ones I haven't heard of here, but there's Hunix. What else? There's Sparky. I've heard of that one. There's Tails. That's a cool one. Gparted. That's the partitioning software. I've used that one. That's a great one. I think I saw another one. There's Clonezilla maybe on here, but yeah, I'm not sure. But I thought I just saw it. Whoops. Yeah, Clonezilla. Yep, I've used that, and that's all based on Debian. It's overall like it's just something I'm happy with, and I think it's a good distro to stick with because it is very stable, and right, if you want to install it on someone's computer for them, they can just go and install it. They can turn it off, they'll use their computer as is if it's just like someone that does web browsing, and it'll work. There won't be any activations. There won't be, oh, this is expiring, we gotta update it, we gotta shut down your computer, do a restart, blah 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 blah, all those things. And it's just simple. I know. Now, this is the best part. A lot of people crap on the Debian website. I think it's fine because I know my way around it. But, it's just a simple website, too. You can easily download their operating system. There's some news here. You can follow along with things. They have events every now and then. They show, like, people, there's Debian, they call it Debian conference or whatever, I forget. But, they have meetups. It's cool. You can get some news about Debian. And then also I like they have their micro news. I know other websites do this too, but I just like looking at this once in a while if I'm kind of in a pinch, be like, hey, I just gotta check on, like just the other day here they released 13.2, so I'm like, oh sweet, I'm gonna download that in case something fails on mine, and I can just put Debian 13.2 on it, whatever, right? But all in all, right, what it really comes down to is kind of, some of the key things they have, right, in their, I guess, their reasons to use Debian. But it's really stable, and it just, for me, it's the fact that it feels good, like it feels solid. It doesn't feel clunky. After using lots of different software over the years, you can just kind of feel when something's not right. But all in all, I think it's just a great OS. It's very well known. It's lots of people use it, so there's going to be updates, all those kinds of things. And with Debian, right, it's not like you're using, you're not on Windows, right? You don't have to have an account with it, blah blah blah. And it's free and open source too, so you can look at the code, you can modify your own code and do all those kinds of things. And I know there's some people that hate systemd. Well, the fact of the matter is there is, like, I think derivative of Debian called I think it's called Devian, I think, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You can use that as well. But all in all, my favorite Linux distro is Debian. I know I didn't go into too many technical details, just wanted to give a brief overview, but that is my favorite Linux distro, and I'm going to stand on that until something comes to beat it. But I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts down below. I'm not gonna argue on why this is my favorite, because it just is. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, and maybe you learned a little thing or two about Debian. If you want, maybe I could have another video kind of going into Debian, maybe go through some of the history. But yeah, if you liked it, please sure to like, comment, and or subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.